Hello, hi there. A big and bubbly hello to everyone joining us today. Do give us a shout out in the chat and let us know where you're zooming in from. So, to discuss today, a burning question that's forever been cooking in everyone's mind is how on earth do we conduct BV operations, especially with the dogs? And is that even legal? So, we've heard your request loud and clear in every single webinar. And guess what? We've kidnapped a very special guest for an hour to crack the code on BVLOS drone regulations for you. Let me introduce him to you. With a master's in advanced mechanical engineering, he has had experience in the aviation industry as a systems and safety and compliance engineer. Currently, he is working as the technical standard manager for DJI in Europe and is responsible for product compliance of DJI drones with EU regulations and product certification. He also works closely with regulators, standard development organizations, and other stakeholders in the UAS industry to enable safer and more efficient drone operations in Europe. So please welcome on stage Matteo Natel. Hello, hi Matteo. Welcome to the
Hello,
show.
thank you very much.
Along with him, I've also invited Achal Negi. He's the Flight Bases Director of Business Development and a permanent member across all the zillion webinar series that we host. And he's here to walk us through the various ways one can make pilotless VVLOS operations happen. So, audience, hold your horses. Please also feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A section or on the chat window, and I'll try to get them addressed from the experts at the end of the session. The session is also being recorded and will be made available online shortly. With that, I'll stop sharing my screen and over to you, Matthew.
Thank you very much. So if you can just confirm when you can see my presentation. There we go. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Great. So thank you very much, and especially thank you for having me. So hello everyone. As mentioned, my name is Matteo Natale, and I am the Technical Standards Manager for DJI in Europe. So that means I take care of the product compliance of our drones to EU regulations. Before we get into our presentation, I'd like to go very briefly into our company profile, and just in case you're not familiar with it. So DJI is the world's leading developer and manufacturer of civil drones. And since we were founded in 2006, we've led the world with civilian drone innovations that have both empowered visionaries to turn their imagination into reality, and also professionals to entirely transform and redesign their work. So over the years, since our establishment in 2006, we have embraced a very iterative, product-focused development philosophy that has seen our core technologies change and evolve and grow into the multifaceted product suite that we have today. So we've started off with drones, but we now also have, handheld gimbal devices, action cameras, and professional videographer equipment even. But our technology can be much more than just gadgets and drone for enthusiasts. As you know, we do create tools that can make a tangible impact in real work scenarios, and also make the world ultimately a better place, a safer place, a more sustainable place even. For example, today we are making an impact across numerous industries, many of which maybe some of our viewers are working in, and also improving work efficiency and safety. We have the examples of firefighters, search and rescue teams, construction teams, surveyors, mappers, agriculturists, and so on. So let's get right into it, and let's start with the EU regulatory framework. So since 2020, in Europe, EASA member states, that is the European Union Aviation Safety Agency, so their member states, that is EU member states plus Norway, Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, and Iceland, they all fall under the same regulatory framework that is comprised of Delegated Regulation 945, which you can see here on screen, which defines the requirements for the design and manufacture of UAS, and also Implementing Regulation 947, which defines the requirements for the operation of drones, as well as for personnel, including remote pilots and organizations. So what does this mean? Now, essentially, a harmonized regulation accounts for uniform procedures across all member states, which also allows cross-border operations. This is particularly useful in Europe because, compared to other continents, Europe is quite small, it's quite packed, that makes it quite easy to have the occasion to come up with a cross-border operation. It also accounts for uniform specifications for manufacturers, which can demonstrate compliance of their products, as we do, through, for example, drone classes or drone class identification labels. So you may have seen on some of our products a C0, C1, 2, 3, or 4 product label, but more on that later. This in turn ensures greater safety, greater security, and accountability, while also fostering innovation in the whole sector, both in Europe and ultimately, because of the size of the European market, also worldwide. So, 3 categories of operations we have in Europe. Now, the regulation in Europe follows a concept of proportionality. Okay, so the requirements associated with each drone activity are tailored to their level of risk. We therefore use what is known as an operation-centric regulation to mitigate the risks posed by drone operations. So what does this mean? We have a risk-based approach, right? Which means that the regulatory framework applies to both commercial and non-commercial operations. So identical drones may be used for both a commercial and a non-commercial activity with the same risk to uninvolved parties. And in this regard, in Europe, the level of risk is addressed in 3 categories of operation that you can see on screen here. We have the open category, which is the low risk category of operations. Here, there is no level of involvement with the authority. However, there are many operational limitations and technical restrictions. For example, you can only fly visual line of sight, so no BVLOS allowed here, up to a maximum altitude of 120 meters above ground level, and only with drones up to 25 kilograms. The specific category, on the other hand, has a far greater level of involvement with the authority. However, it does have far fewer restrictions. In fact, in the specific category, you can fly beyond visual line of sight with drones above 25 kilograms and also above 120 meters in altitude. So essentially, the specific category is the category that we're interested in for most commercial operations. We then have the high-risk category, which is the certified category. This is beyond the scope of our presentation, as it is, as I said, a high-risk category, and it's more meant for transportation of passengers, dangerous goods, or even overflying assemblies of people with drones above 3 meters. And this category has a regulatory regime similar to that of manned aviation. Now, back to the open category. Now, the open category is in turn subdivided in 3 subcategories, which you can see on screen here. And furthermore, as I mentioned before, class identification labels define which types of drones can be flown in which subcategory. And these are subcategory A1, A2, and A3, each with their respective set of requirements. Now, subcategory A1 is the fly over people, but not over assemblies of people class, although this obviously has to be minimized. And you can do this with drones in classes C0 and C1, for example, the DJI Mini or the Mavic 3. Subcategory A2 is the fly close to people. You can fly 50 meters from uninvolved people, and you can do this with drones in classes C0, 1, and 2. And finally, the A3 category. In the A3 category, you can only fly at 150 meters from people with all the drones with the class labels of the open category. Ultimately, there are also classes C5 and C6, which define the product requirements for the so-called standard scenarios, STS-01 and STS-02, for the specific category. Right, more on the categories of operation. As I said, the open category has no level of involvement with the National Aviation Authority. An operator must only register their drone, check if they need insurance with their state, and fly according to the operational limitations set by the subcategory. Any technical restriction will be taken care of in parallel by the manufacturer, who issues a drone with a class identification label, with already all the technical restrictions taken care of. On the other hand, the specific category has no restrictions in terms of mass, flight range, or altitude. You can fly with a big drone and beyond visual line of sight at any altitude, but it does have a very high level of involvement with the authority. In fact, an operator must request an approval by submitting to their National Aviation Authority what is known as a CONOPS, or a concept of operations, and a risk assessment. We'll take a look at that later and what it means. Let's first talk about class identification labels. Now, the following are the technical requirements and the limitations that you will find in all class labeled drones. We have drones ranging in the open category from C0 to C1, with mass limitations going from drones of less than 250 grams, like a DJI Mini, all the way up to 25 kilograms. Moreover, in the open category, as I said before, height limitation above ground level is capped at 120 meters. There are other requirements in the open category class labels that are not necessarily shared by all class labels. One of these, for example, is RID, remote identification. Remote ID is the ability of a drone in flight to provide identification and location information in real time, as well as, for example, the Geo-Awareness Service, which provides drone operators with up-to-date information on ground risk hazards, air restrictions, and prohibitions related to the drone's location and altitude. Additionally, we see there's two other class labels, C5 and C6, meant for the specific category. The specific category class labels also require a geocaching system, which essentially allows a remote pilot to set a virtual perimeter, a programmable perimeter to their operation, as well as a flight termination system, or an FTS, to be used in case of emergency. Now, starting from the 1st of January, so only a couple weeks ago, operations in the open category must be conducted either with a class labeled drone or without a class identification label, but only if the drone was placed on the market before January 2024. If that's the case, if you have purchased a drone before this date without a class identification label, you can still fly in subcategory A1 if the drone weighs up to 250 grams, or in subcategory A3 if it weighs up to 25 kilograms. So, the following are the current class labeled products on the market. This is the table I've taken from the EASA website. You can go and consult it on EASA's website, and it'll tell you the up-to-date list of drones bearing a class identification label. With all companies, as you can see, most products are DJI products. We have drones bearing C0 labels, such as the DJI Mini series, Air 3 and Mavic 3 series bearing a C1 label. We have the Mavic 3 Enterprise with the M30 bearing a C2 class identification label, and also the M350 RTK. As I said, you can always consult this table online, keeping in mind that these are, yes, open category product labels, but they can also be used in the specific category. Let's therefore start talking about the specific category and how to obtain an operational approval, without which we can't go ahead and operate. Now, as I said, the medium risk operations fall within the specific category, with very few limitations, but quite a higher level of involvement with your National Aviation Authority. Now, to operate in the specific category, an operator must obtain an operational approval by their authority. And to do so, the operator must submit a risk assessment and a concept of operations, known as CONOPS. Now, a CONOPS describes all the technical and operational details of the envisaged operation, while the risk assessment may take the form of a SORA, that is a specific operations risk assessment, which you may have heard of, or a predefined risk assessment, a PDRA, which is essentially a SORA, but its template has already been pre-made by the authority, or what is known as a standard scenario, which is exactly the same thing, but it doesn't require an approval. An operator can just submit, declare they are operating under a standard scenario. However, to do so, they must have a drone bearing either a Class 5 or Class 6 identification label. Once approved by the authority, the operator can then go ahead and conduct their operation. There's also to say that experienced operators may apply for an LUC or a light unmanned operator certificate, in which they can approve their own operation. But more on the most common scenario, that is the Specific Operations Risk Assessment, or the SORA. Now, SORA is a risk assessment methodology developed to establish that an operation can be conducted safely within a specific category. It is used to assess the risk of the operation towards third parties, that is, uninvolved people on the ground, and also uninvolved people in the air, that is manned aviation, so literally other manned aircraft. This is a very complex methodology. We could spend a whole day on this, but in summary, what SORA does is it combines the risk posed to third parties on the ground, so people on the ground, with the risk posed to manned aviation. So it will combine these two risks and derive what we call the SAIL, which you can see in this graph here. We can call the SAIL the final level of risk of the operation. It actually drives the target level of safety, but for simplicity, let's call it the final level of risk. Now, this risk of the operation is classified in increasing levels of SAIL, which you can see going from SAIL 1 all the way up to SAIL 6. Obviously, the higher the risk of the operation, the higher the SAIL. In this regard, each SAIL level has its corresponding requirements that an operator must comply with, tailored to the risk of the operation. Now, operations in SAIL 1 and 2 are considered low-risk operations, so their requirements are quite easy to comply with. Operations in SAIL 3 and 4 are known as medium-risk operations, and operations in SAIL 5 and 6 are quite high-risk operations. So let's concentrate now on the most common operations and the most feasible operations nowadays, and that is SAIL 2 operations. So today, the most common operation in the specific category fall under low-risk SAIL 1 and 2 operations. As higher level, as I said, require a design verification, which is dealt at EASA level. A design verification takes a lot of time, a lot of money, and does not account for configuration changes in a product. So it does have quite the challenge. So we do tend to nowadays go and aim for SAIL 2 operations. These account for beyond visual line of sight operations with medium-sized drones in sparsely populated environments, or even operations with small drones in possibly populated environments or in segregated areas. All of these are particularly common scenarios with most DJI platforms. For example, operations above 120 meters, such as for aerial mapping and so on. Operations with drones above 25 kilograms. A prime example of this is precision agriculture operations with the DJI Agras, which can be conducted at a low SAIL level due to the low risk posed to uninvolved people in rural environments. And then finally, another prime example is the topic at hand today, which is fully automatic pre-programmed routes in beyond visual line of sight with no pilot on site, which may be conducted in the specific category with the DJI Dock. That is our drone-in-a-box solution, which may be deployed in remote areas, but what we can call a fleet manager. So the DJI Dock, as you know, is our docking station for the DJI M30 or the M3D, and it allows takeoff, landing remotely, charging, and ultimately also sheltering for our drone. So what are the current potential SAIL 2 operations with the DJI Dock? Now, as we said, we're aiming for a SAIL 2 operation because it does get quite challenging after that. Now, the determining factor to achieve a SAIL of 2 is the ground risk in this case. If you remember, the level of risk of the operation, the SAIL, is derived from ground and air risk. So risk posed to third parties on the ground, and manned aviation. Now, in this case, in an operation with the DJI dock and in relation to the type of operation it was conceived for, actually, it is in fact the limiting factor that drives up the sale and hence the most challenging aspect of the SORA. Now, the final ground risk of the operation, I say final because it accounts for any mitigation that we choose to apply, must come down to a value of 3 if we want to get a sail 2 operation. So if you take a look at this table, any 3 here is what we're going for, okay? Currently, DJI has 2 docking stations, as I said, or drone-in-a-box solutions on the market. And we have the DJI dock, which we can call Dock 1, the original one, which is coupled with the DJI M30T, and the DJI Dock 2, or the Dock Mini, some people call it, which is coupled with the much smaller and new DJI M3D. Now, the ground risk varies in relation to the overflown environment, as you can see from the columns here, and the size and mass of the drone. So clearly, to driving, if you have a populated environment with a big drone, that'll give you a high risk to third parties on the ground. If you fly in the middle of nowhere with a small drone, that'll give you a far lower ground risk. And as I said, we're aiming for a value of 3. With the M30 falling in the second column here in this table, we can only operate beyond visual line of sight over sparsely populated environments, while the much smaller M3D, which falls under the first column, can potentially be flown over populated areas. However, mitigations must be applied. These will be both operational or technical. For example, the use of a parachute, which will sometimes be required to lower the ground risk down to a level of 3. Finally, an additional element to consider, which may be required if flying close to adjacent areas with particularly high level of risk, is the implementation of a flight termination system, or an FTS, which may be asked in this kind of operations. So to conclude, what do we have for the future of dock operations? We've just started, and today in Europe, we know from experience and from the work we put in and the operators that use our docking stations, that feasible beyond visual line of sight operations, so in the specific category, are being conducted mainly with relative ease in sail 2, up to sail 2. If the ground risk is too high, these can be enabled by employing ground risk mitigations as expected by the SORA, such as, for example, a parachute, or other operational strategic mitigations. And ultimately, as I just said, a flight termination system is often required to protect adjacent areas with particularly high levels of risk. But what does the future hold? So currently, sail 4 operations now require what we called before what we said was a DVR. And they also a design verification report. And they also require the operator to hold a light unmanned operator certificate, both of which are very challenging to obtain nowadays. However, since very recently, EASA has updated their regulation, and sail 3 operations can be conducted without having to resort to a design verification report. This means that manufacturers will now be able to declare compliance with the technical requirements of the SORA through the new means of compliance, or MOCs, as they're called by EASA, that they have released just last December. This will allow manufacturers to demonstrate the compliance of their products for operations up to sail 3, getting operators a step closer to a broader range of beyond visual line of sight dock operations in more densely populated areas. And obviously, in DJI, we are very keen on enabling the broadest range of operations for our users. So I invite you to stay tuned. Thank you very much for listening. And at this point, I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll pass the ball to Ashal.
Great. Thank you so much, Matteo. Thank you for that informative session. Lot of key points to cover, and I can see a lot of questions which has come up already in the chat box. So we'll be taking that up at the end of it. So yes, moving forward, so I would quickly take up the part from the software and the integrations piece of it, the things that you would need to get integrated with your dock, as well as how you can get all that information on your software dashboards, and which could end up helping you build your Sora or ConOps, as Matthew clearly mentioned. So Flightbase, as you know, is an enterprise drone autonomy software platform. It's a platform designed for enterprises so you can automate your drone dock operation and scale it. And that is where we have been working closely with partners all across the globe and deploying automated DJI dogs for several use cases. So let's dive deeper into it in the next slide, where let's understand what are the critical pieces of drone autonomy first. So, Vashali, if you can go to the next slide. So, when you're looking at key components of drone autonomous drone operation, it's a jigsaw puzzle. There are so many pieces, right? All of them have to come together, and it's not just about drones, dogs, the remote control software. You need various components, right? Matthias spoke about FTS. There could be parachute. There could be ADSB systems, detect and avoid systems, and everything. So in the next slide, we see that there are several components, right? Not just the hardware and software, but the entire piece of software, payloads, UTM, ADSB, weather, parachute, FTS, and so on. Now, when you have these many components, how do you kind of bring everything together, right? And how can enterprises combine this? And answer to that is Flightbase. So in the next, you have the entire platform using which you can have the entire automated drone operation and reach your end applications. So allow me to take a minute to explain this diagram a little bit more in detail. So at the bottom layer, you have hardware, which is your drones, docking stations, any payload. Now these payloads could be payload of the drones, it could be a payload of a dock, like a live footage coming from DJI dock, or it would be external CCTV cameras, which you need to integrate for visual inspection of the drone and dock or the area. Or it could be something like a sense and avoid system, detect and avoid system, which you have placed near the dock, which can sense any aircrafts which are going around. Or it could be an external ADSB sensor, which you need while the dock is closed. You still need to see the aircraft data around the dock. So from the hardware piece, you can connect to the Flightbase platform, and it provides you all the integrations for BVLOS, flight automation, flight safety, fail safes, and data security. And then, of course, you have your workflow managers where you can integrate it with your current systems like alarm systems, video management systems. And then, of course, you have apps and integrations available. So you have ready apps where you can post-process your data, finally getting to your use case. So today's topic is more focused on BVLOS and demystifying that. So let me take a deeper dive in the BVLOS integration piece of it and what Flightbase has to offer in this segment. So if you go to the next slide, Flightbase provides a lot of integrations for BVLOS enablement. As we work with customers all across the globe, we have different components available. So as this slide highlights, there are integrations for detect and avoid. Like we work with partners like Iris Automation, CASIA G, to other partners who have detect and avoid technology, where we can get that data from external sensors or systems and present to you on the dashboard. As well as we have a smart return to altitude, safe altitude kind of protocols, which allows the drone to descend it as soon as it detects, or you're able to plan your missions according to your airspace as you get the data. Same goes with integrating ADSB technologies or UTM, having a backup 5G connectivity link, or having a parachute or FTS on the drone. So in the next few slides, we're going to take a deeper look into some dashboards and some features which are available in the Flightbase platform. So as we look at geocaching or we look at no-fly zones, this becomes really critical. So Flightbase provides a dedicated feature where you are allowed to create different no-fly zones. So you can demarcate those areas. You can even demarcate areas where you have chances of RF disconnect, where you're not able to get the RF signals because you're flying in a city or a building. So you have some dead spots. You have some areas where you, of course, cannot fly. It could be schools or anything related to your area where it is not allowed to fly. All of those things could be marked, and you can have the no-fly zones where drones would not enter those areas. Similarly, if you go to the next slide, we have geofences. So we have comprehensive geofence features available where you can create zones, and you are able to create geo zones as well as geofences of different heights, different area, and mark them. So the drone does not go out of it. So the fly zones, which is no-fly zones, and geofences can work in conjunction where the drone would not enter those area, as well as if it's a geofence, to not go out of that area. So these features are available, and these are tied to the dock in the maintenance window where you can select the device. You can see that on the top you have devices, DJI dock, and M30T. And then in the zones, you can configure that. So as you deploy your DJI dock in that particular area, you are able to configure your no-fly zones as well as geofences. Now, once you've done that and if you have started flying, the most important thing is to log your flight very well. And that is where Flightbase has built a very sophisticated flight logging mechanism, which records your flight and provides you all the data of your flights and historical flights. So as you're doing those operations and as we're working with the next level of BVLOS operations all across the globe, this data would become very critical because now you can demonstrate that your operations are really safe. You've flown 200 missions, 2000 missions in that particular area, what kind of risk have come and how you have mitigated that. So as you go further and scale your operation, all these logs are going to help you. Moving to the next slide, once these logs are there, the Flightbase platform also generates automatic PDF reports of these flight logs. So as the time comes where you need to audit them or you need to send a report to any authority, you are able to do so. And you have complete logs of these reports where you can, which could be generated automatically with right snapshots, right snapshot of the maps, right snapshot of the videos, or anything that was taken, any external alarm or trigger that might have come from a detect and avoid system. All of those things are captured, and you have those flight logs as a PDF report also available, which is very well used in a lot of parts of the world where they use this to have their audit or compliance done for their BVLOS operations. With that, let's segue to fail safes. So, of course, DJI provides really great fail safes built in with the dock, and that is where we come into the picture and add more on top of it. So, what you see here is, of course, return to docking station, which is by default in the DJI dock. What we additionally provide on top of that is return to safe location plus go to safe altitude. So, specifically, go to safe altitude. Now, this is very critical when you are doing these kind of operations where Flightbase automatically takes drone to a safe altitude as soon as you have any trigger from a detect and avoid ADS-B sensor or a UTM. So this has allowed a lot of our partners and customers get BVLOS approval, because once that intrusion has been detected or there is an aircraft flying there, what happens next? So far, of course, operator had to take control and maybe take a manual control and bring the drone down or to a safe altitude. But now we have go to safe altitude, which allows your drone to descend to a safe altitude, which could be pre-configured depending upon the location where you're flying. Now, moving to the next one, we of course integrate with ADS-B. This is something I spoke about earlier. So Flightbase provides integrations with external ADS-B sensor, not just on the drone data. So of course, DJI drones have ADS-B on board, but when say the docks are closed and the drone is off, and you still need to see what is going around. And this is something which has helped our partners in Australia and other parts of the world as well get BVLOS approval, where you can have these external ADS-B sensors, which are alongside placed with the dock, and you can get that data and you can see the airspace from the data which is coming from those ADS-B sensors. So this is already integrated into the Flightbase platform. And then we move on to the parachute. So parachutes, of course, we spoke about them a little bit with FTS and parachute coming in. So we can integrate with third-party parachute. We have already integrated with the partners like AVSS, DRS, and as new parachutes are coming, we are making sure that those integrations are available. So as you're flying over people and those kind of sparsely populated or populated areas, you'd be able to use these parachutes on board and get that integrated on dashboard, as well as configure them or have a flight administration system integrated with Flightbase. And this is something which we have been doing now for a few years and providing these dashboard. And in the next slide, we have now been working with partners where we are able to get approvals for Beyond Visual Line of Sight in different kind of countries that you see over here. And these are site-specific approvals so far. Of course, the industry is evolving and it is very specific to a location. But that is where the crawl, walk, run kind of philosophy come into the picture, right? Where we've been working on specific sites, specific partners, so we can build those cases, build those integrations, build the technology that is required, which makes sure that your operations are safe. And all of that, once we are closely working with you and you are working with our team, we can help you with a template for SORA. So in the next slide, that is something that is demonstrated where we can help you with the template, ready templates based on where you are, based on where what are the integration that you need and what are the questions that you need to answer in your SORA. We are able to help you and provide you with the ready template. So that saves a lot of time and you are able to quickly make your SORA application. So yeah, that is it from my side. I'll open up for Q&A for Matteo, and I can take those questions. And yeah,
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Great. So thank you very much. So I can scroll through the chat and go through the questions.
Sorry, Matteo. I will just go through these questions one by one, so it's simpler for you, and it's easier for you to answer them as well. Before that, thank you again for this wonderful session and making it so valuable, especially for explaining such a complex concept so simply. And just getting into all the different categories of operations, the class identification labels, and especially how to get to an approval, to request for an approval, you need to go through ConOps as well as the risk assessment, and especially making it so simply easy for all the different people who had constant questions around how to get to BVLOS operations for dock operations. So I'll jump into the questions. You have a lot of them, out there. Okay. Yeah, just a minute. So one question from Arrigo is that Mavic 2 EA will receive remote ID, and are there any remote ID solution for docking station?
So we're about to release in DJI a press release saying which one. So we have online, as I showed before, a list of products that are already bearing a class identification label. We are finalizing a strategy and we'll be releasing very shortly a press release saying which other products will be receiving a class identification label. Now, as I said before, those products that don't have a class identification label can still operate in the open category if they have been bought or placed on the market before January 2024. Of course, any other products we'll be releasing meant for the open category from now onwards they will all have a class identification label. To operate in the open category with a class identification label, you do need remote identification as well as to operate in the specific category. Those products that don't have a remote ID, for those products without remote ID, there are on the market out there remote ID modules that can be applied.
All right. Moving on to a similar question on the same thread is, when will Mavic 2 Enterprise get CE marking? Is that going to happen?
That's exactly the same answer as to what I covered. So we'll be releasing our strategy as to which products will be receiving a class identification label, which ones we're working on, and which one will not. Keep in mind that those that have been placed on the market before, you will still be able to use them in the specific category or in the open category because they were placed on the market, as I said, before January 2024.
Right. There's a question around for DJI M300 and M350 in a box. So there are different manufacturers of building docks for M300 and M350. Will the regulation be different from that of DJI dock, or will that be the same?
Well, so the regulation is one. In all of Europe, we have a harmonized regulation in order to fly and to operate, especially with a docking station, which does add another element of uncertainty. We don't only have the machine that is flying, we also have a DJI a docking station, which also means that not necessarily the pilot will be on site. So you'll have to, there's way around it. For example, for pre-flight checks, which are required in the SORA assessment. I know all of these things come together and work with the DJI dock. I am not sure with other drone-in-a-box solutions from other companies. If I've understood the question correctly.
Yes, and primarily with the drone also does it change? So because the DJI dock has the Matrix 330 and with DJI 300 or Matrix 300 or 350, does it significantly change from?
Well, the DJI Dock 1 is meant for the M30. The DJI Dock Mini is meant for the M3D. They're not meant for other drones, and I cannot say whether our drones can apply to other docking stations or other companies. That I don't know, and I can't really say. So the regulation works. We have had SAIL 2 approvals with the DJI Dock and the M30. Anything other than this is beyond this scope, and I can't really say, to be honest.
All right, no worries. Moving on, there's another question around, because you mentioned about FTS. So does DJI at any stage envisage adding a parachute system to the small DJI dock so as to allow operations in populated areas?
That is something that DJI is evaluating, also in regard to C5 and C6 marking, whether to add an FTS or if I've heard the question correctly, or a parachute. This is still something we are evaluating internally, and we'll be finalizing a strategy as soon as possible. Obviously, our aim is to enable as many specific operations as possible. SAIL 2 operations in C5 and C6, and also any other SORA application with the highest SAIL as possible. So this is something we're working on. We don't currently have a finalized strategy to share.
All right. And also there's another question linked to it. Is there any parachute system that you recommend for operations?
That you would have to check the commercial off-the-shelf products. There is, I can't really say.
All right. Okay. So there's a question from Rafal, which says that does drone-in-a-box systems also have to be equipped with remote ID, or which is mandatory in EU countries from the 1st of January? Is that the same answer that you had in the previous question?
Yes. So from the 1st of January, all drones operating the specific category and all drones with class label markings in the open category need and require an active remote ID system compliant with the standards recognized by EASA. There are also, as I said, remote ID modules out there that can be applied to other drones that are not up to date and that you wish to operate in the specific category. The remote ID module list is also listed on the EASA website.
All right. And does DJI M300, would that have remote ID as well? There's a question from Mihai.
Currently, all the DJI products bearing a class identification label have an up-to-date remote ID solution.
All right. There's one last question before I move on to Achal. That is SORA assessment done by local aviation regulations, or are there EU aviation authorities that apply for the overall EU region?
So an operator who wishes to operate in a EASA member state will apply and request for an approval to their national aviation authority. So that is ENAC in Italy, DJC in France, LBA in Germany, and so on. That is up to SAIL 2. Higher risk operations, which require, which have higher technical requirements, will probably require the intervention of EASA to validate the design of the product. But the operational approval is issued by the National Aviation Authority.
All right. So one question, Matthew, we got a lot of them coming in. That Frank has a question with regards to his Australian drone pilot and operator license. Can he use that in Europe or Italy?
In Europe, well, to operate in Europe in the open category, you either need to complete the online A1, A3 training, or for A1 and A3, obviously, or the remote pilot certificate of competency for A2. So those will be the what is required to operate under EU regulations and legislation. I'm not familiar with the Australian regulation, to be honest.
All right. Another question around night flights. So is it also specific category, and is there a requirement for SORA as well?
There is no specific requirement linked to night operations. In fact, class identification labels take into account lights of the drone, and they can be conducted in the open category at night.
All right. I think we have most of the questions covered. Moving on to one question for Achal, which is yes. The question is, how is Flightbase different from FlightHub 2? Flightbase looks to be more expensive.
Right. I love that question. I get that all the time. So yeah, thank you for asking that, Peter. And I think Frank has also that question there. So really great question there. So you need to understand where Flightbase is designed as a platform. It's a middleware which allows you to bring different components together. Whereas FlightHub 2 is, of course, an application that comes with the dock. So Flightbase, while when you look at dashboards, it looks quite similar. Flightbase is more kind of a middleware or platform. It's an infrastructure layer which allows you to integrate with enterprise workflows. So the number one is, as you deploy it for enterprises have their own software. They may need an on-premise solution. They need an in-country cloud. They need a lot of integrations with their own systems. Could be yard management systems, alarm systems, video management systems. And that is where Flightbase has those workflows and possibility of those integrations which are already ready and modules. So Flightbase workflows, we conducted a session on this module, and we're going to talk more in the upcoming series of Dock and Roll that we are doing, where how we are making integration seamless with third-party systems. Then we also have something called App Connect, which allows your third-party integration. Say you want to use Drone Deploy along with DJI Dock, or you want to use any other software like Pix4D, Skycraft, or you're using a solution where you're doing AI analysis, like we have our partners from Data from Sky, who do great traffic management and AI. We have ready integrations available with different apps, so we can directly send the data. One of the key thing with the dog operation is it's never about just one use case. Suppose you're doing a construction site monitoring, you would do the entire flight, then you want to send the data to a survey mapping software, to a BIM software, or parallelly, you would want to do a site security where you also have security surveillance and you want the data to be shown in a video management systems like Milestone or Genetec. So Flightbase provides that infrastructure layer where you can integrate all these components together and have that enterprise application. So one is workflow. Second is, of course, the data security and compliance piece of it. So Flightbase is already ISO 27001 compliant, which is very much required for enterprise software in Europe. It's GDPR compliant, as well as it's SOC type 2, SOC 2 Type 2 compliant, which is primarily used in the US, but also being accepted in some parts of the countries. So Flightways is already meeting those compliance. Plus, it also offers flexible deployment options, as I spoke earlier. So some enterprise customers are so big where they have their own servers and they want it to be deployed on premise, and then or they need an in-country cloud, or even customers, we have had customers now, we are deploying air gap solution, no internet connectivity, they have their private intranet stretched over big areas, and these could be police departments who have their own network, and they want an air gap system. So all of that is being offered by Flightways. Then, of course, we spoke about the BVLOS regulations and integrations piece of it, where you need to talk to third-party systems, could be parachutes, ADSB, UTM service providers, like Altitude Angel from UK, or similar partners are there who provide UTM, to even going to integration with weather services. So all of these things are required when you actually scale operations and you're looking to deploy for enterprise use case. And as you scale, the fourth factor is reliability and scalability, where we have now deployed systems over last 3 years as we are compatible with so many docking stations, where we have scaled this and we understand what is required to even operate, say, 50 dogs from one dashboard or 80 dogs from one dashboard. So Flightways has been designed for that. So just a quick recap, it's about workflow integration with enterprises, the data security aspect of it, BVLOS integrations, and reliability and scalability. So yeah, that is the answer to that question. And in terms of the price point, of course, so price point is as similar with DJI Flight Hub 2, and we can help you understand a little bit more on these. If you once you start adding up all the cost of the video minutes, the storage, and everything, those price points even match or could compare. You can literally compare them really well when you do your production deployment. So you can reach out to our team and we'll be happy to help you understand the pricing and how it differs in terms of scale.
All right, Achal. Matthew, would you like to also quickly share the difference between SORA 2.0 versus SORA 2.5? That's also been a common question.
Right. So there are many differences. So for those who don't know, SORA, the Specific Operations Risk Assessment, is risk assessment methodology that was developed by JARUS. JARUS are the Joint Authorities for Rulemaking on Unmanned Systems. It is completely as a free association, voluntary-based association, where all industry stakeholders and regulators from around the world join forces to suggest to work on documents which are then suggested to authorities. For example, SORA was made by JARUS and it was adopted by EASA with some changes, slight changes, obviously. SORA 2.5 was released so a couple of years ago, and now I say we because obviously DJI obviously participates in JARUS meetings and in the JARUS meetings, and we do work all together on SORA 2.5. Now, SORA 2.5 is almost finalized. It will be released this year. It will be released shortly, and then in Europe it'll be adopted by EASA further on. There are many differences. So far, we have been mainly working on the ground risk. In SORA 2.5, it'll be more quantitative. But this is something that ideally the differences lie in increased usability and just making things simpler for a user. You'll have to wait very briefly for SORA 2.5 to come out, but I can assure you it'll have a higher usability, and it'll be out pretty soon.
Yes, all right. I think we are almost towards the end of the session. Before we end it, Matthew, Achal, if you would like to share some contact information for anybody in the audience who would like to reach out to either Flightways or DJI, any email ID which they can reach out to. So it will be great if you could drop them in the comment section. And also, I have a very quick surprise for everyone in the audience again. So we have the world's largest drone autonomy summit, NestGen, coming back on the 24th of February 2024. It's a completely virtual conference with a lot of sessions that are dedicated on completely focused and dedicated on drone autonomy, right from regulations to dog showcases to drone in a box deployments, to different technologies that are powering or empowering BVLOS operations. So it's a complete 12-hour crash course, masterclass, whatever you'd like to call it, and it's on a Saturday. So you could definitely NestGen and chill throughout the entire day. And we have a ticket for everyone for free. It's later going to be costing almost 24 US dollars. So now's the time to grab it. You can just quickly scan the QR code, and we'll also be dropping a ticket in your inboxes. So please check it out. Thank you again. Achal, Matteo, if you would like to share some closing thoughts before we end this.
Absolutely. I don't think I have access to the chat, but I invite everyone to follow me on LinkedIn, to ask. Do feel free to ask me anything. I've tried to be as brief as possible on such a complex topic. So please do reach out if you have any further comments, any further questions. I'll try to help as much as I can. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you, Bashali and Ashal, for having me here.
Great. Thank you so much, Matteo.
On chat, yes. Sorry, Achal.
Yeah, if you can put both the LinkedIn on chat, so you can also reach me out on LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to help you navigate through this journey, adopt DJI docs for your operations, navigate through BVLOS integrations and everything that we covered today. And we keep doing these sessions. We would be demystifying BVLOS, add it as it evolves. And of course, we look forward to having more sessions with Matteo in the coming time. So let me take this opportunity to thank Matteo for his valuable time taking out and sharing all that knowledge again. And it was lovely having you, Matteo, here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It was great to be here.
Great. Thank you, audience. Thanks for joining. And yeah, Bashali, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you again, everyone, for your time today. We'll come back soon. Have a great day out there. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.